3 days before my wedding, my fiancé told me to hide my wedding dress. Then I found a note inside it that said, he knows what happened to your mother. The first time my fiancé asked me to hide my own wedding dress, I thought he was being sentimental. 3 days later, I found out he was trying to protect me from a secret that could have destroyed our entire family. I had been engaged to Daniel for 8 months, and everyone thought our wedding was the happiest thing happening in our lives. Daniel was steady, thoughtful, and almost annoyingly organized. My younger sister Rachel was my maid of honor, and she adored him. The only strange thing was that Daniel refused to let anyone see my wedding dress before the ceremony. He said he wanted the first reveal to be special, so I agreed. 2 weeks before the wedding, I came home early from work and found him standing in our bedroom with the garment. Bag open, he looked startled. "What are you doing?" I asked. He zipped it immediately. "Nothing. I was checking the seam." That night, while we were eating pizza, he suddenly said, "If anything weird happens before the wedding, promise me you won't panic." I stared at him. That's an incredibly terrible thing to say 12 days before getting married. He smiled, but it looked forced. Forget I said it, I couldn't. The next morning, Rachel called me crying. Someone had sent her an anonymous message containing a photograph of our house and one sentence. "Ask Daniel why your sister's name is on the mortgage." I thought it was a scam until I checked the paperwork. Rachel's name wasn't there, but Daniel had transferred a small percentage of the property into a separate account connected to her old address. When I confronted him, he admitted he'd been receiving threatening letters for months. Someone claimed Rachel owed money from a business she'd supposedly run with an ex-boyfriend. Rachel swore she'd never owned a business. Daniel said he believed her, but he discovered someone was using her identity to open accounts. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. He looked exhausted. "Because whoever is doing this knows everything about you. I didn't want them knowing you were scared." That explanation should have comforted me, but it didn't. The next afternoon, I found a folded note inside my wedding dress. It said, "He knows what happened to your mother." My hands went numb. Our mother had died 6 years earlier after falling down the basement stairs. The police called it an accident. Daniel had never met her. I demanded answers, and this time he stopped trying to protect me. He told me he'd hired a private investigator after discovering that the threats were connected to a woman who had worked with my mother years ago. According to the investigator, Mom had witnessed financial fraud at her workplace and planned to report it. Before she could, someone broke into her home. Daniel had found an old police report showing that the basement door had been damaged from the inside, something the original investigation had overlooked. Then came the part that made me sit down. Rachel hadn't been targeted because of some fake business. The person using her identity was our mother's former supervisor, who had been stealing money for years. He had recently discovered that Rachel possessed an old box of Mom's documents and wanted it back. Daniel had secretly moved Rachel's belongings into our house because he believed it was safer there. The wedding dress had been hiding something too. A tiny recording device Daniel had found taped beneath the garment bag, placed there so someone could listen to conversations inside our bedroom. I felt sick. The wedding was canceled that evening. Police recovered the device and arrested the former supervisor after matching his fingerprints to the break-in evidence. But the biggest shock came later, when Rachel finally opened the box she'd been hiding. Inside was a letter from Mom dated 2 days before her death. She wrote that she was afraid, but she didn't want her daughters growing up believing fear should control their lives. She also wrote, "If something happens to me, don't let anyone convince you that silence is the same thing as safety." I cried so hard I could barely finish reading it. Daniel sat beside me and said, "I should have trusted you with the truth sooner." I told him he was right. We eventually rebuilt our relationship, but we never had the wedding we planned. A year later, Rachel and I stood together at a small ceremony by the lake, and I wore a completely different dress. This time, there were no secrets sewn into it. No hidden cameras and no fear waiting behind the door. Just the people I trusted, the truth my mother left behind, and the realization that sometimes the most loving thing someone can do isn't protect you from the truth. It's trust you enough to face it.